The first video games were adaptations of existing board games and sports. For instance, Pong was an adaptation of ping pong, and many of the first adventure games were literal adaptations of board games. But in general, computer games allow you to do much more complicated things than board games. Systems that wouldn't be able for the average board game player to track on their own are quite easy to do on the computer. And it allows for much more complicated projects. My name is Martijn Plas. I'm a games developer for almost 20 years now. I work at my own company, Catnip Games, and we do projects for people all around the world. To develop a game all the way to a final product, you need a large amount of different skills. Obviously you need programmers, you will need various kinds of artists, you need game designers, level designers. When you start with the development on a game, you begin with a concept, with an idea that you have for the game, and then you work that out as a game design. Try to do that as explicitly and as specifically as you can to see if it's any good, because most of your ideas will not be good. That's just how that works. And then as soon as you have your concept, the first thing you will do is develop a prototype so that you are able to playtest that with as many people as you can get a hands on. Many game projects die at the prototype phase. 4 out of 5 prototypes will never see the light of day because they don't work in practice. And if you can, let your parents play the game. Find people that don't usually play games and have them playtest your game. And that way you'll be able to see much more easily if your interface is intuitive, if they understand the instructions that are on the screen. And if you can, record it, so that later on you can go back and over the footage and see, oh, at this point the player was stuck. And then you know what to improve. A game generally consists of 2 separate components. There's the gameplay and there's the setting. The gameplay is the most important because if the gameplay isn't good, then it doesn't matter how pretty your game is, it's not going to be, people aren't going to enjoy it. But likewise, if you have the best gameplay in the world but it doesn't look very good, then it can be very hard to get people to play it. The setting for a game is completely separate and it can be interchangeable depending on what kind of project you're trying to make. For example, if you think about the first-person shooting genre that most people know, if you put that in a contemporary setting, you've got Modern Warfare. If you put it in a sci-fi setting, you've got Halo. If you put it in a medieval fantasy setting, you're thinking about For Honor. And the gameplay in many of these are mostly the same, but it's the setting that makes a difference. Getting all the assets you need for game development is very difficult. Ideally, you would get everything from your own team. Sometimes that's not possible because your team's too small or you don't have the required expertise. Generally also, that's why in the game development industry there is the term programmer art. That is where you start development on your early prototype for your playtesting purposes with whatever you can come up with as a programmer. Players can be small boxes, the world can be drawn in MS Paint. It really doesn't matter as long as you can get the gameplay concepts across. The most well-known project I've worked on is called Fortresscraft. The ideas for Fortresscraft started out long before Minecraft was a thing, but we couldn't build the game because the technology wasn't there. We were unable to render the things to the user in a way that could do the game justice. So that game was put on hold. But when then at some point in the past Minecraft became a thing, they showed that it was possible to render the terrain specifically in a way that was very new. This allowed us to make the game that we wanted to make. Before that we couldn't. So that's where we took the idea that was shelved, took it off the shelf and actually built it. A lot of people dig themselves into a pit when they think about the target audience for their game. But the most important thing is to make a game that you enjoy playing yourself, because you will be playing it the most. If you make a game that you enjoy playing yourself, that will reflect into the game. It doesn't really matter how wacky it is. It could be as niche as you can make it. As long as you enjoy it, there will be other people that also enjoy it. And that will reflect better on the game than making something generic. If you have your own game idea and are really thinking about, I want to build that game, my advice is don't. Write it out, make a nice proper game design of your idea and put it on a shelf and look at it again in like 4 to 5 years. Because your first game projects will fail and the game will probably never see the light of day. And if it's your dream project, that's a shame. I've done that myself. Keep your first game ideas very small. Make sure you have a design that you can completely write out with all of the specifics on one A4 paper, and that should be plenty for a first game.